Some of you may be a little bit confused today, not by the eggs and all of the noises, but by the lack of flowers. For many years at Tapestry, we've participated in a ritual called Flower Communion. It's a time when people bring flowers from their own homes and to share here at Tapestry. It's an enduring symbol of springtime for Unitarian Universalists. Rest assured, there will be a flower communion this year on June 4th, along with other UU congregations around the world, while we celebrate the 100th anniversary of this beloved ritual that was first created by Norbert Čapek and his congregation in Prague. Drawing on the symbolism of new flowers in the springtime, the usual date for flower communion is in June. Since we here in Southern California have very different senses of flowering and springtime, well, we're a little flexible with the date. And if I am completely honest, for many years we have celebrated flower communion on Easter Sunday because Easter's a complicated holiday for us. We clearly come out of a Christian and Jewish theological heritage, but how do we navigate those stories today? We might begin to answer that question by doing something like Thomas Jefferson. I'm not talking about his political ambitions or his farming or inventing. I'm talking about his theology. Specifically, the way he navigated the person of Jesus and the miracles that are part of the story of his life. In 1820, Thomas Jefferson completed his version of the Bible that made sense to him. Thomas Jefferson created his own version of the New Testament. He wrote an original translation from Latin and Greek sources, and in the process, he eliminated all of the miracle stories from the Gospels. This new version kept intact the depictions of Jesus as a moral teacher and a gatherer of radically inclusive community, but excluded anything that defied the laws of nature. What you're left with is a story of a really interesting guy with a deep faith and the beginnings of a countercultural movement that he was leading. The Jefferson Bible is an important book for us, not because it holds any particular authority. Jefferson was only tangentially related to Unitarianism. We kind of try to claim him as our own, but it's a bit of a reach. But this book, the Jefferson Bible, is important because it embodies the way many Unitarian Universalists navigate our faith and our Christian heritage in particular. Just cut out the miracles and keep the rest. It's kind of a just the facts, ma'am version of the Bible. But there's another option. In 1841, just 21 years after Jefferson completed his Bible, the minister Theodore Parker preached a sermon that takes another stab at how we might navigate our heritage. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a sermon called The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity. Theodore Parker suggested that our calling is to distill the core message of Christianity. He believed, as I do, that there is something so essential, so core to the Christian message that it would remain true, even without the library's worth of theological speculation or the tradition of the church. It would be true without the Bible. It would even be true if the person of Jesus had not lived to spread the message. Radical, engaged love is the permanent core of the faith, he argued. The core isn't about right belief, but about right living. The teachings of Jesus were about respecting and being in relationship with the sacred, and about treating one another with love. The core is about relationship and the duties that grow out of that relationship. For Parker and those early Unitarians, our salvation wasn't wrapped up in a Christ who lived 2,000 years ago, but by the way we cultivate our own hearts and our daily lives. To me, this is a much more compelling way of interacting with our religious heritage and the heritage of other traditions too. Rather than summarily removing the stories of miracles, we can ask, what were those stories pointing to? What is the truth that they aim to express? That, to me, is an interesting question. Is there a permanent message to be found in this Easter story? And if so, what is it? As I revisited the story, the message I found this week is a little bit of a slippery one. It's one that makes most of us in South Orange County scratch our heads and squirm a little bit, even though you've heard it before. It's kind of summarized in the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the realm of God is yours. Blessed are you who are hungry, you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep today, you shall laugh. Blessed are the humble, they will inherit the earth. If it's possible, I want to invite us to let go a little bit of what we know of Christian history and the tremendous empire, power, wealth, dominance that we know as the church of the past 2,000 years. If it's possible, I want to invite us briefly to travel back to a historical context of the story of Jesus. Regardless of the miracles, regardless of who he actually was, or even if he actually was, the story tells us of a kind teacher who built radically inclusive community. His vision of the world was truly countercultural. It wasn't a huge community. They were quite small, and they didn't have much money. They were scraping together fish and bread, if I remember correctly. But they loved each other in a way that made a difference. And for a variety of reasons, Jesus came into the crosshairs of the state. And the largest empire of the world executed him publicly in the most gruesome and demeaning way that was available to them. He was a humble person to begin with, and the government did everything it could to physically and emotionally crush him and his community. That's the guy who is said to have risen from the grave 3 days later. This guy who was humiliated. Not the founder of a worldwide religion of unfathomable wealth and power that we know as Christianity, but this humble guy. The Reverend John Burens suggests, is it possible that the real power of the resurrection might be not that meekness can become power, but that the only real power is the power born of weakness? And the only glory is that born of dishonor. Is this possible? That the meek will inherit the earth, not because of their meekness, but because the highest sovereignty is born out of meekness. That may not be the Easter message that you signed up for. The last shall be first and all that. But there's another version of this core truth that's been flashing across your television screens, your phones, your computer screens in recent years in a message of protest signs. DACA recipients and others fighting for immigration justice in the U.S., particularly those coming from Mexico, have been using a simple, powerful statement. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. They tried to bury us. they didn't know we were seeds. Within Mexico, that saying is traced back to activists who used it in support of justice for the 43 students who were disappeared in Iguala, Mexico in 2013. These were students of a teacher's college that the government disappeared in connection with drug cartels. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. I was surprised to learn this week, though, that the saying is a bit older, traveling back to a Greek poet. Dinos Christianopoulos was a Greek poet, novelist, folklorist, and scholar. Born in 1931, he actually recently died in 2020. Although not widely known, his poetry, with its sharp aphorisms on life and love, has established him sort of as a cult literary figure in Greece. In 1978, he wrote the words, "What didn't you do to bury me, but you forgot that I was a seed?" Most people say that he wrote these lines when he was addressing the Greek literary community that criticized his own writing at the time. He was a pretty brash writer, with vivid descriptions of sensuality. He was also gay, though not publicly claiming that identity. The beauty of this particular poem is that the power of the writing lies in its very capacity to put down roots and then inspire people worldwide. He was never a renowned poet, but his work took on a life of its own. His words spread. It's especially remarkable since he never left his country of Greece. This is a difficult, even paradoxical idea for us, but I think it's an idea that's central to the Christian message and the story of Easter that we celebrate. They tried to bury us. They didn't know we were seeds. The real power of resurrection might be not that meekness can become power, but that the only real power is the power born of weakness. New life comes out of a combination of potential and challenge. Part of the magic is in the seed, which is alive, full of DNA and stored up nutrients that help it grow. But another part of the magic is in the soil, which is made up of old leaves and twigs and little creatures that have composted and decayed to make a bed where the seed can lie quietly, waiting to open its shell and take root. It takes both to make spring happen. The light and warmth and clarity, and the cool, damp dimness challenge. People are like that seed. Pieces of our own lives are like that seed. Pieces that are perceived as weak, flawed, gnarled up bits seen as worthless, maybe ridiculed, painful pieces of the past. Jesus, along with many other wise people, taught that sometimes we have to lose ourselves to find ourselves. Sometimes we have to make an ending in order to find a new beginning. So I guess the question is, are there pieces of yourself that need to be buried to be transformed? An outdated vision of yourself, a grudge that needs to be buried, an emotion or a memory that you need to plow beneath the soil, a piece of identity or self-image that you need to drop and scatter into the wind. This is the time, my friends. The flowers and the birds proclaim it. Our neighbors of three Abrahamic faiths are in a season of spiritual renewal. This is the time. What brokenness or perceived weakness will you transform this season of life? Amen.